Hi, 8th grade. Happy Monday of week 3. I hope some of you guys used the weekend to catch up on work from last week that we maybe haven't done yet. I haven't gotten a ton of engagement on the Google Classroom, but I'm really hopeful that you guys are doing this work and doing this learning to make sure that you're going to be ready and prepared for your 8th grade year. We're going to finish the book this week. We're going to read it today, tomorrow, Wednesday, and then Thursday and Friday you're going to have some time to catch up on comprehension questions you missed so far. So this is a perfect time to jump in, watch the videos from the last 2 weeks, and figure out what's going on in our book. Today we're going to read pages 98 to page 108. Page 98. Pressed tightly against one another in an effort to resist the cold, our heads empty and heavy, our brains with the whirlwind of decaying memories, our minds numb with indifference. Here or elsewhere, what did it matter? Die today, or tomorrow, or later? The night was growing longer, never ending. When at last a grayish light appeared on the horizon, it revealed a tangle of human shapes, heads sunk deeply between the shoulders, crouching, piled one on top of the other, like a cemetery covered with snow. In the early dawn light, I tried to distinguish between the living and those who were no more, but there was barely a difference. My gaze remained fixed on someone who, eyes wide open, stared into space. His colorless face was covered with a layer of frost and snow. My father had huddled near me, draped his blanket, shoulders laden with snow. And what if he were dead as well? I called out to him. No response. I would have screamed if I could have. He was not moving. Suddenly, the evidence overwhelmed me. There was no longer any reason to live, any reason to fight. The train stopped in an empty field. The abrupt halt had wakened a few sleepers. They stood, looking around, startled. Outside, the SS walked by, shouting, "Throw out all the dead! Outside, all the corpses!" The living were glad, for they would have more room. Volunteers began the task. They touched those who had remained on the ground. "Here's one! Take him!" The volunteers undressed him and eagerly shared his garments. Then 2 grave diggers grabbed him by the head and feet and threw him from the wagon, like a sack of flour. There was shouting all around. "Come on, here's another, my neighbor. He's not moving." I woke from my apathy only when 2 men approached my father. I threw myself on his body. He was cold. I slapped him. I rubbed his hands, crying, "Father, Father, wake up. They're going to throw you outside." His body remained inert. The 2 grave diggers had grabbed me by the neck. "Leave him alone. Can't you see that he's dead?" "No," I yelled. "He's not dead, not yet." And I started to hit him harder and harder. At last my father half opened his eyes. They were glassy, and he was breathing faintly. "You see?" I cried. The 2 men went away. 20 corpses were thrown from our wagon. Then the train resumed its journey, leaving in its wake, in a snowy field in Poland, hundreds of naked orphans without a tomb. We received no food. We lived on snow. It took the place of bread. Give me a second, guys. The days resembled the nights, and the nights left in our souls the dregs of their darkness. The train rolled slowly, often halted for a few hours, and then continued. It never stopped snowing. We remained lying on the floor for days and nights, one on top of the other, never uttering a word. We were nothing but frozen bodies. Our eyes closed, we merely waited for the next stop, to unload our dead. There followed days and nights of traveling. Occasionally, we would pass through German towns. Usually, very early in the morning, German laborers were going to work. They would stop and look at us without any surprise. That means that the Germans, seeing the Jews and what's going on with them, they're not surprised. They know exactly what's happening. They've seen this before. One day, when we had come to a stop, A worker took a piece of bread out of his bag and threw it into a wagon. There was a stampede. Dozens of starving men fought desperately over a few crumbs. The worker watched the spectacle with great interest. Years later, I witnessed a similar spectacle in Aden. Our ship's passengers amused themselves by throwing coins to the natives, who dove to retrieve them. An elegant Parisian lady took great pleasure in this game. When I noticed two children desperately fighting in the water, one trying to strangle the other, I implored the lady, "Please, don't throw any more coins." "Why not?" she said. "I like to give to charity." Does it seem right to you what the lady's doing, throwing a coin for these people to hurt themselves over? Do you think that counts as charity? Do you think it was right of this German man to throw one piece of bread because he wanted to see all of the Jews fight each other for it? I don't think that it's right. In the wagon where the bread had landed, a battle had ensued. Men were hurling themselves against each other, trampling, tearing at, and mauling each other. Beasts of prey were unleashed, animal hatred in their eyes. An extraordinary vitality possessed them, sharpening their teeth and nails. A crowd of workmen and curious passerbys had all formed along the train. They had undoubtedly never seen a train with this kind of cargo. Soon, pieces of bread were falling into the wagon from all sides, and the spectators observed these emaciated creatures ready to kill for a crust of bread. A piece fell into our wagon. I decided not to move. Anyway, I knew that I would not be strong enough to fight off dozens of violent men. I saw, not far from me, an old man dragging himself on all fours. He had just detached himself from the struggling mob. He was holding one hand to his heart. At first I thought he had received a blow to his chest. Then I understood. He was hiding a piece of the bread under his shirt. With the lightning speed, he pulled it out and put it into his mouth. His eyes lit up. A smile, like a grimace, illuminated his ashen face, and then it was immediately extinguished. A shadow had lain down beside him, and this shadow threw itself over him. Stunned by the blows, the old man was crying. Guys, this is crazy. So the old man had some bread, hid it in his shirt, and went to eat it. When he started eating it and he looked so happy, somebody attacked him and jumped on him. "Mir, my little Mir, don't you recognize me? You're killing your father. I have bread for you too." The man that had attacked the old man was his son. He collapsed, but his fist was still clutching a small crust. He wanted to raise it to his mouth, but the other threw himself on him. The old man mumbled something, groaned, and died. Nobody cared. His son searched him, took the crust of bread, and began to devour it. He didn't get far. 2 men had been watching him. They jumped him. Other men joined in. When they withdrew, there were 2 dead bodies next to me, the father and the son. I was 16. In our wagon, there was a friend of my father's, Mir Katz. This is a different Mir than the boy who just killed his dad. He had worked as a gardener in Buna and from time to time had brought us some green vegetables. Less undernourished than the rest of us, detention had been easier on him. Because he was stronger than most of us, he had been put in charge of our wagon. On the 3rd night of our journey, I woke with a start and I felt 2 hands on my throat, trying to strangle me. I barely had time to call out, "Father!" Just that one word. I was suffocating. But my father had awakened and grabbed my aggressor. Too weak to overwhelm him, he thought of calling Mir Katz. Come quickly, someone is strangling my son." In a few moments, I was freed. I never did find out why this stranger had wanted to strangle me. But days later, Mir Katz told my father, "Shlomo, I am getting weak. My strength is gone. I won't make it." "Don't give in," my father tried to encourage him. "You must resist. Don't lose faith in yourself." But Mir Katz only groaned in response. "I can't go on, Shlomo. I can't help it. I can't go on." My father took his arm, and Mere Katz, the strong one, the sturdiest of us all, began to cry. His son had been taken from him during the first selection, but only now was he crying for him. Only now did he fall apart. He couldn't go on. He had reached the end. On the last day of our journey, a terrible wind began to blow, and the snow kept falling. We sensed that the end was near, the real end. We could not hold out long in this glacial wind, this storm. Somebody got up and yelled, "We must not remain sitting. We shall freeze to death. Let's get up and move." We all got up. We pulled our soaked blankets tighter around our shoulders. We tried to take a few steps, to shuffle back and forth in place. Suddenly, a cry arose in the wagon, the cry of a wounded animal. Someone had just died. Others, close to death, imitated his cry, and their cries seemed to come from beyond the grave. Soon, everybody was crying, groaning, and moaning. Cries of distress hurled into the wind and the snow. The lament spread from wagon to wagon. It was contagious, and now hundreds of cries rose at once. The death rattle of an entire convoy with the end approaching. All boundaries had been crossed. Nobody had any strength left, and the night seemed endless. Mere Katz was moaning, "Why don't they just shoot us now?" That same night we reached our destination. It was late. The guards came to unload us. The dead were left in the wagons. Only those who could stand could leave. Mere Katz remained on the train. The last day had been the most lethal. We had been 100 or so in this wagon, and 12 of us left it. Among them, my father and myself. We had arrived in Buchenwald. So 100 people left in that wagon with Ellie, and 12 of them survived that windstorm, the violence over the bread being thrown in, and the other things that we just read together. Only 12. At the entrance to the camp, SS officers were waiting for us. We were counted, and then we were directed to the Appelplatz. The orders were given over the loudspeakers. Form ranks of 5s, groups of 100, 5 steps forward. I tightened my grip on my father's hand. The old familiar fear, not to lose him. Very close to us stood the tall chimney of the crematorium's furnace. It no longer impressed us. It barely drew our attention. A veteran of Buchenwald told us that we would be taking a shower, and afterward we'd be sent to different blocks. The idea of a hot shower fascinated me. My father didn't say a word. He was breathing heavily beside me. "Father," I said, "just another moment. Soon we'll be able to lie down. You'll be able to rest." He didn't answer. I myself was so weary that his silence left me indifferent. My only wish was to take a shower as soon as possible and to lie down on a cot. Only it wasn't easy to reach the showers. Hundreds of prisoners crowded the area. The guards seemed unable to restore order. They were lashing out left and right to no avail. Some prisoners who didn't have the strength to jostle or even to stand sat down in the snow. My father wanted to do the same thing. He was moaning, "I can't anymore. It's over. I shall die right here." He dragged me towards a pile of snow from which protruded human shapes, torn blankets. "Leave me," he said. "I can't go on anymore. Have pity on me. I'll wait here until we can go into the showers. You'll come and get me." I could have screamed at him in anger. To have lived and endured so much, was I going to let my father die now? Now that we would be able to take a good hot shower and lie down? "Father," I howled, "Father, get up right now. You will kill yourself." And I grabbed his arm. He continued to moan. "Don't yell, my son. Have pity on your old father. Let me rest here a little, I beg of you. I am so tired. No more strength." He had become childlike, weak, frightened, and vulnerable. "Father," I said, "you cannot stay here." I pointed to the corpses around him. They too had wanted to rest here. "I see, my son. I do see them. Let them sleep. They haven't closed an eye for so long. They're exhausted, exhausted. His voice was so tender. I howled into the wind. They're dead. They will never wake up. Never. Do you understand? This discussion continued for some time. I knew that I was no longer arguing with him, but with death itself, with death that he had already chosen. The sirens began to wail. Alert. The lights went out in the entire camp. The guards chased us towards the blocks, and in a flash there was no one left outside. We were only too glad to not have to stay outside any longer, in the freezing wind. We let ourselves sink to the floor. The cauldrons at the entrance found no takers. There were several tiers of bunks, and to sleep was all that mattered. When I woke up, it was daylight. That is when I remembered that I had a father. During the alert, I had followed the mob, not taking care of him. I knew he was running out of strength, close to death, and yet I had abandoned him. I went to look for him. Yet, at the same time, a thought crept into my mind. If only I didn't find him. If only I were relieved of this responsibility. I could use all of my strength to fight for my own survival, to take care only of myself. Instantly, I felt ashamed of myself forever. I walked for hours without finding him. Then I came to a block where they were distributing black coffee. People stood in line and quarreled. A plaintive voice came from behind me. Eleazar, my son, bring me a little coffee. I ran towards him. Father, I've been looking for you for so long. Where were you? Did you sleep? How are you feeling? He seemed to be burning with a fever. I fought my way to the coffee cauldron like a beast, and I succeeded in bringing back a cup. I took one gulp, and the rest was for him. I shall never forget the gratitude that shone in his eyes when he swallowed this beverage, the gratitude of a wounded animal. And tomorrow we'll finish the book. Next up is vocab. I have given you guys the notes for our new vocabulary words in the next video. Today I'll teach you 10 of the words. Tomorrow I'll teach you the other 10 of the words. And do the same thing that we do in class. Take notes as I give them to you on the words. All right, next up, vocab video. Thank you.